Last night, Rabbi Sobo delivered a very beautiful and moving sermon about the Torah portion, tangentially, but also more significantly addressing some of the important issues that are happening in our time, in this week, in the last few days. And she did so in such a way that I thought it was not only beautiful, but important that those who were not able to hear it yesterday have the opportunity to hear it. And for those of us who did hear it yesterday, sometimes it's important for us to hear it more than once. So with that, we engage in our words of Torah this morning.
Of course, I went a bit off script last night, so this won't be entirely identical if you're hearing it the second time. I sat at camp last week in an educational session where campers were asked how they would respond to different scenarios. And one group ultimately ended up debating whether it was easier to stand up to bullying if somebody else were the target or if you were the target. These middle schoolers brought predictable arguments. One camper chimed in that it was most definitely easier to stand up for somebody else because you didn't have as much stake in the game. You could stand on the sidelines, think about it clearly, plan, walk in, do something, and walk away hoping or knowing perhaps that you helped. It's not your life, it's not your feelings being hurt, so it's easier since as an adult you've got that emotional distance. And of course another camper challenged back, but you didn't have to act. It is precisely because it isn't your life that makes it easier to walk away without doing anything. But when it is your life, your physical, your emotional well-being at stake, you have more motivation to act, and therefore that is easier to stand up. And from there, the debate continued. And, well, I shouldn't say debate, but more discussion. Because we teach the value of multiple opinions with the Talmudic quote, Elu ve'elu, where two groups, the students of Hillel and Shammai, debated vehemently for their opinion on a matter, and a heavenly voice comes down and says, these and these, i.e. both sides, are the words of the ever-living God. In essence, both competing views are acceptable and based in appropriate Jewish thought. So keep that in mind for a minute. Rabbis across the country threw out our planned sermons and were figuring out on Friday afternoon how to speak about the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, and with it, federally protective reproductive rights, sending the decision to the state level, thus allowing, I believe, 23 states with trigger laws to have those go into effect, and giving the impetus for other states like ours, who are sitting poised to put legislation into effect, to do so. For many, this decision and the implications for pregnant people now or people who may become pregnant in the future is devastating and scary. My virtual world has been flooded with Jewish responses as to why Judaism supports abortion and reproductive rights. And I could give a very, very long lecture on this topic. I could, but I won't. I don't need to tell you what Judaism says or doesn't say about abortion, about when life begins, about separation of church and state, and other related topics. Rather, I want to take you back to that image of campers in a circle, or perhaps that image of the bullying situation itself, and figuring out how you might choose to respond, depending on which role you're fulfilling. There are those in our community for whom legislation around reproductive rights is akin to standing up for themselves, and those for whom it may feel more like it's standing up for somebody else. I can tell you within our community, there are those who have had abortions and terminated pregnancies with the full support and backing of Jewish tradition, and that for some of those pregnancies, they were desperately wanted. They desperately wanted to carry a child to term and have a healthy baby. And I can also tell you within our community that there are those who have decided against terminating a pregnancy, even for unplanned, undesired, or medically complicated pregnancies. Within our community, there are those who have supported a pregnant person through making this choice. And within our community, there are those who chose not to support a pregnant person or couldn't imagine supporting somebody through an abortion. Within our community, there are those who are ambivalent about the topic. And within our community, there are those who feel like it's just not their place to speak up. All of us, no matter where we fit in, also fall on different parts of that camp discussion about whether having that strong personal connection, or specifically not having that strong personal connection, makes it easier or harder to stand up. And here's the catch. Judaism doesn't care how hard or how easy it is to stand up, how close this hits home, or how emotionally distant we may feel. We are told in no uncertain terms in the Holiness Code in Leviticus, Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, do not stand idly by the blood of your fellow. What I do know is there is literal dam re'echa, literal blood of our fellows on the line here. We know banning abortions will not stop abortions. It will increase maternal infections and death. It will increase the cost for travel and time off from work, and thus with it, healthcare disparities and more. Literal dam re'echa. So whether you feel that pregnancy should be federally protected or left to the states, or borrowing the words of Rabbi Leah Berkowitz, that it should be a deeply personal decision like any other medical decision, where one might consult a partner or faith or family for guidance and support, but that at the end of the day, that decision is between a pregnant person and their medical provider. No one else gets to be in that room, not clergy from your faith or clergy from another faith, and absolutely not your legislator. What worries me most, though, is not what this decision means for abortions, but rather also the ripple effects, what it means for reproductive health care, and more broadly, since in some of the states, infertility treatments and contraception are also implicated in the measures that go into effect, what that will mean for people in our country, and what precedent it will set for LGBTQ and gender-affirming care and our personal autonomy in general. If a legislator can be in the room and force me to save a not yet viable life, could those same legislators force me to donate blood, to donate organs after my death, to be a living organ donor in life, to save an actual existing life? I could argue Jewishly I ought to do these things, but I still have the free will to choose and make those decisions about my own health, to value my life over another. In arguing that an ill person is required to fast on Yom Kippur, the rabbis in the Talmud, this is from the Tractate Yoma, which discusses Yom Kippur, the rabbis get into a lovely debate on how to decide how ill is too ill. And pregnancy gets put into the mix too, not that it's an illness, but because pregnant people probably shouldn't be fasting. And the rabbis pose the argument that if possible, we consult a medical professional. And if that medical professional recommends that a person eats, it would be a sin for them not to eat. Because these are the commandments that we should live by them, not die by them. You've probably heard that in the fall from the pulpit a few times. So we can essentially force somebody who is ill to eat if a doctor says this person needs to eat to live. And then the rabbis, being the rabbis, pose the opposite situation, where a medical professional has evaluated and deemed that this person isn't so ill that they have to eat in order to protect their health. But the ill person themselves says, I need to eat. I'm too sick, I need to eat. Anybody want to bet whether the rabbis say you follow the expert? Oh, I got answers called out last night. It's 50-50. The rabbis cite a proof, and we might think that they'd follow the experts over the layperson, and we'd be wrong. The rabbis deem, based on Proverbs, and they quote, the heart knows the bitterness of the soul. In essence, the ill person is the expert of their own body. And likewise, a pregnant person is an expert on their own body. You consult outside professionals, you consult the doctor, you consult the rabbis, but ultimately the person is trusted to make their own healthcare decisions. In the wake of the Supreme Court's decision, we may feel like the person standing up for ourselves. We may feel like the person standing up for somebody else. We may feel like the person on the sideline who is clueless or shouldn't have a voice. We all have our own experiences, we all have our own opinions, and we all have our own feelings on this matter. As we choose how to react to the Supreme Court decision, it is also important to recognize that there are hearts that are embittered. There are real lives at stake. This isn't just a theoretical legal question and Rita and Harry, I'm looking at you as people who have been in Talmud, of where we say, did this situation ever actually happen? This is real. And so in this week's Torah portion, the 12 spies return from scouting out the land, and all 12 of them presumably see the same land. And 10 of them, I think, driven by fear and are scared. And they're untrusting. And they report back to the community that there are all of these challenges that seem insurmountable and that it would be impossible to conquer the land, and it would be better if we just turned around and went back to Egypt, to what we had. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, see that same land, see those same challenges, and from verses a little after where we read last night, essentially report back that yes, there are challenges. Yes, they seem very difficult. Yes, it is scary. Everything, essentially, these 10 spies said is correct, except look what God did for us in Egypt. If we have faith, if we work together, those challenges aren't insurmountable. So we can be like the 10 that are overcome with fear and anxiety and worry that these challenges that are very real that lie ahead of us are insurmountable. Or we can be like Joshua and Caleb and trust and have faith and be scared and still move ahead. And so I hope as we enter into the weeks and months and years ahead, that we have the faith of Caleb and Joshua to say, yes, we've scoped out the issues at hand, and yes, they are big. And yes, I may look at them one way, and you may look at them the other way. But they are surmountable. I hope we see the urgent need to not stand idly by, whether it's personal or theoretical or both, that we stand up for our own and our neighbors' rights to make our own healthcare decisions. And I hope as we do this, we consider the bitterness of the hearts that we may feel and that others feel. I hope we have compassion to respond to that bitterness, whatever the source is, and move together as one community. Shabbat Shalom.
Beautiful and important words.